In a crumbling Brooklyn apartment, 34-year-old Wyatt Hayes stared at a mountain of past due notices. The damp walls offered no comfort to the exhausted carpenter. Across the tiny room, 5-year-old Harper clutched a plastic inhaler. Her small chest heaved in a silent, exhausting battle against the heavy, stagnant air. Wyatt's calloused hands crumpled the final eviction warning. He looked at his daughter, the crushing weight of their reality settling squarely on his broad shoulders. He knelt beside her, offering a gentle smile that didn't reach his weary eyes. He smoothed her golden curls, masking the rising tide of absolute panic. Miles away, the atmosphere was a different kind of suffocating. 32-year-old Sloan Kensington stood motionless behind the expansive glass of her Manhattan corner office. Below her, the city moved in perfect, predictable lines. Inside, the reigning CEO of Kensington Global faced an acquisition crisis that her vast wealth could not immediately solve. A heavy mahogany folder lay open on her pristine desk. The Heritage Trust had rejected her final offer, citing a severe lack of family values in her public image. Sloan turned her icy, calculating gaze toward the rejection letter. Her posture remained impeccably straight, betraying no sign of the empire-threatening vulnerability hidden beneath her tailored suit. She picked up a solid gold pen, tapping it rhythmically against the glass table. The sharp sound echoed through the sterile room, marking the countdown to her next move. Two entirely different worlds, separated by rivers of wealth and circumstance, were both rapidly running out of time and desperate for a singular, monumental shift. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Wyatt worked inside Sloan's $50 million Tribeca penthouse. Having no other choice after his babysitter canceled, he hid Harper in a quiet corner. Sitting cross-legged on an imported Persian rug, 5-year-old Harper colorfully occupied herself with a box of crayons, oblivious to the high-stakes luxury around her. The private elevator chimed, its doors sliding open smoothly. Sloan stepped out into her fortress, expecting absolute silence but immediately freezing at the unexpected sight. Her sharp, golden blonde hair caught the hallway light as her icy glare locked onto the small visitor. Sloan did not tolerate chaos in her perfectly structured life. In Harper's small hands, a bright purple crayon snapped with a clean, sharp click. The little girl blinked up at the towering woman, entirely unfazed by the famous Kensington glare. Holding up the broken piece, Harper pointed to her drawing. She innocently asked the cold billionaire for tape, explaining her dinosaur had broken its leg. Sloan remained completely frozen, her brilliant mind failing to produce a corporate directive for a fearless 5-year-old child holding a broken crayon. Hearing voices, Wyatt rushed into the grand foyer. His hands were covered in mahogany sawdust, his heart dropping to his stomach as he saw his employer. Wyatt immediately moved between his daughter and the billionaire, his broad shoulders tensed in a highly protective, desperate stance as he frantically apologized. Sloan opened her mouth to issue a default termination, but as her calculating eyes scanned Wyatt's fraying flannel cuffs and genuine panic, a sudden silence fell over the room. The heavy silence in the grand foyer was abruptly shattered by the sharp vibration of a smartphone. Sloan retrieved the sleek device from her tailored jacket, her analytical eyes narrowing at the urgent notification from her public relations director. Attached to the message was a link to a prominent gossip column, featuring a slightly blurry photograph taken through the expansive penthouse windows. The long-lens image captured Sloan Kensington standing near a rugged, broad-shouldered man and a small child in her private residence. Bold letters screamed across the screen, questioning if the notorious billionaire had been hiding a secret family all along. A frantic text followed, stating the Conservative Heritage Board had seen the photo and was suddenly returning their calls with intense interest. Slowly, Sloan lowered the phone. Her sharp gaze shifted from the digital screen back to the exhausted carpenter and his quiet daughter. The gears within the billionaire's brilliant, calculating mind began to turn at a rapid, unstoppable pace as she evaluated the sudden shift in leverage. She instructed Wyatt not to pack away his tools, her voice eerily calm, smooth, and entirely devoid of its usual commanding pitch. Kneeling gracefully on the marble floor, Sloan accepted the broken crayon from the child, declaring that she and the carpenter needed to have a very serious conversation. 10 minutes later, Wyatt sat in Sloan's hyper-modern kitchen, clutching a glass of water like a lifeline against the sterile marble island. A few feet away, Harper happily ate artisanal macarons, completely oblivious to the heavy, suffocating tension filling the vast room. Sloan stood perfectly straight opposite him. She smoothly slid a sleek, black leather folder across the cold marble surface. Her tone was strictly business as she detailed his background, flawlessly reciting his massive medical debts and precarious housing situation. Wyatt's jaw tightened visibly. A flush of deep, humiliated anger crept up his neck as his private struggles were clinically exposed. He demanded she simply fire him rather than coldly recite his tragic resume, his voice rough and highly defensive. Unbothered by his anger, Sloan tapped a manicured fingernail against the leather folder, smoothly stating she was actually offering him a highly compensated role. Wyatt frowned, his protective suspicion deepening as he stared at the billionaire, questioning the nature of such an unexpected job. Leaning forward, the fierce CEO fully emerged. Sloan stated with absolute clarity that she required a strategic, legally binding husband. Wyatt stared back in total silence, waiting for a punchline that never came. The sheer weight of her impossible proposition hung heavily in the air. Unfazed by his silence, Sloan smoothly detailed the terms. She proposed instantly clearing his massive debt and depositing millions into a trust fund. Furthermore, she guaranteed the young girl immediate access to top private pediatric specialists, effectively eliminating any future respiratory concerns. Wyatt looked down at the thick contract inside the black leather folder, staring at the financial salvation presented on crisp white paper. He glanced across the vast space to where Harper was happily giggling, smudging chocolate across her pale cheeks. The exhausting reality of his situation set in. Absolute pride could not keep a secure roof over his daughter's head. Turning back to the CEO, Wyatt laid down his strict conditions. Separate rooms, zero physical intimacy, and complete parental authority over his child. Sloan agreed immediately, her expression unchanging as she extended her pale, perfectly smooth hand across the cold marble island. Wyatt stared at her manicured hand, noting how entirely untouched by hard labor it was compared to his own. He reached out and firmly grasped her hand. The strategic civil agreement was officially sealed in the quiet, sterile kitchen. Within a week, the carpenter and his daughter moved their meager belongings into the sprawling penthouse, effectively stepping into an opulent, golden cage. For Wyatt, the sprawling luxury of the penthouse offered no comfort. He stood near the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the distant city streets. Harper adapted to the massive space instantly. She happily sprinted across the imported marble floors, her bright giggles echoing through the sterile halls. The energetic child began trailing behind the formidable CEO like a lost puppy, completely ignoring the billionaire's stiff, uncomfortable posture. Harper innocently offered her stuffed animals, calling her Miss Sloan, much to the executive's concealed but absolute bewilderment. Wyatt watched these interactions from afar. Despite the sudden financial security, he felt exactly like a prisoner trapped inside an elegant golden cage. His old, worn clothing had been discreetly replaced. He opened his new closet to find rows of impeccably tailored, highly expensive custom suits. Wyatt slowly pulled a fine silk tie from a velvet hanger. The incredibly soft, luxurious fabric felt entirely alien against his callous skin. He caught his reflection in a full-length mirror, staring down at his rough, scarred hands, feeling utterly out of place in this pristine world. Strategic preparations for their public debut as a devoted couple were already underway, specifically targeting the prestigious annual Manhattan Charity Gala. Standing alone in the expansive dressing room, the rugged carpenter reluctantly buttoned a crisp white dress shirt, bracing himself for the upcoming performance. Wyatt finished adjusting the stiff cuffs of his extremely expensive custom suit. The dark, Tailored fabric perfectly highlighted his broad, muscular frame. He stared into the full-length mirror. The exhausted, dust-covered carpenter was entirely gone, replaced by a striking, highly sophisticated gentleman. Stepping out of the dressing room, his polished leather shoes clicked softly against the cold marble floors of the sprawling penthouse hallway. A private nanny arrived to watch Harper for the evening. The young girl beamed brightly, innocently declaring that her father looked like a handsome prince. Wyatt offered a genuine, warm smile for the first time in days, gently kissing his daughter's forehead before she retreated to her room. He walked into the grand foyer, where a massive crystal chandelier cast a bright, intimidating light over the open space. Wyatt checked the heavy luxury watch clasped around his wrist, a borrowed, brilliant accessory that felt uncomfortably like a golden shackle. He reached up and nervously adjusted his black bow tie, feeling the immense, suffocating pressure of the high society performance ahead. The annual Manhattan Charity Gala at the Plaza Hotel was the premier social event of the season, and public failure was simply not an option. He stood silently at the base of the grand glass staircase, taking a deep, stabilizing breath as he waited for his strategic partner to appear. The sharp, rhythmic sound of stilettos echoed from the upper level, immediately breaking the heavy silence within the grand foyer. Wyatt looked up toward the top of the glowing glass staircase, his hands dropping slowly and unconsciously to his sides. Sloan descended the steps with effortless grace, wearing a breathtaking custom emerald green gown that contoured perfectly to her figure. Her normally severe blonde hair was pinned up in an elegant twist, entirely stripping away the cold, corporate armor she wore daily. For a fleeting, intensely unguarded second, the ruthless executive melted away, revealing a stunningly beautiful woman in her wake. Wyatt stared in stunned silence. The sheer impact of her presence made him momentarily forget the strict, sterile nature of their contract. Sloan paused halfway down the glass steps. Her analytical blue eyes swept over his perfectly tailored tuxedo and undeniably broad shoulders. Her gaze lingered on the carpenter a fraction of a second longer than strictly necessary, a rare flash of genuine appreciation crossing her features. Quickly regaining her icy composure, she offered a cool, measured compliment about his unexpected sophistication, instantly rebuilding the professional wall between them. Wyatt cleared his throat and quietly returned the compliment, just as the massive mahogany doors swung open to reveal the blinding flashes of awaiting cameras. A sleek black town car glided to a smooth halt before the glowing, historic entrance of the Plaza Hotel. Wyatt stepped out first. His imposing, tuxedo-clad frame instantly drew the frantic attention of the surrounding paparazzi. Turning back, he offered a steady hand, gracefully assisting the billionaire out of the vehicle as blinding camera flashes erupted. Sloan immediately linked her arm through his. Her grip was tight and commanding, silently anchoring them to their fabricated narrative. Walking up the crimson carpet, Sloan displayed a rare, perfectly manufactured smile for the aggressive wall of flashing lenses. Wyatt played his part flawlessly, assuming the role of the grounded, fiercely protective fiancé who had supposedly melted the executive's icy exterior. They stepped into the opulent ballroom, a massive space dripping with crystal chandeliers, silk drapery, and towering champagne pyramids. Hushed whispers rapidly rippled through the high society crowd as the notoriously ruthless CEO made her debut with the unknown contractor. From a strategic distance, several conservative board members observed the couple, nodding in clear approval at the convincingly devoted display. Taking two crystal flutes from a passing tray, their performance seemed entirely impenetrable until an unwelcome figure began cutting through the crowd. Gregory Sterling, a notorious venture capitalist and bitter rival, emerged from the crowd swirling a glass of amber liquor. He stepped directly into their path near the champagne tower, his face twisting into an arrogant, predatory smirk. Gregory loudly mocked Sloan's sudden pivot toward domestic bliss, his tone dripping with heavy, calculated condescension. He then turned his entirely disdainful gaze toward Wyatt, blatantly looking the tall carpenter up and down. With a cruel laugh, Gregory openly referred to him as the hired help, questioning the exact price of his fabricated affection. Delivering a brutal final blow, the rival stated loudly that everyone knew the billionaire lacked a single maternal instinct. The deeply personal insult struck significantly closer to her buried insecurities than she could have ever anticipated. The perfectly manufactured, radiant smile on Sloane's face shattered instantly, leaving her completely exposed. For a powerful woman who always possessed a razor-sharp retort, her throat suddenly closed up in absolute silence. A rare flash of genuine, devastating vulnerability crossed her icy eyes just as Gregory leaned in to press his psychological advantage. Gregory opened his mouth to deliver another cruel comment, intending to press his sudden psychological advantage. Before the rival could speak, Wyatt shifted his large, muscular frame smoothly and with absolute authority. He stepped directly in front of Sloan, entirely shielding her vulnerable, shattered expression from the hostile gaze. The polite, grounded warmth vanished instantly from the carpenter's eyes, hardening into something far more dangerous. It was replaced by a cold, fiercely protective steel that took the arrogant venture capitalist completely by surprise. Wyatt spoke in a low, vibrating rumble that easily cut through the ambient classical music of the ballroom. He calmly warned the billionaire that if he ever used that disrespectful tone again, he would physically demonstrate how a carpenter takes things apart. Gregory's arrogant smirk vanished entirely. He visibly paled, taking a quick, highly cautious step back from the imposing contractor. Muttering a hasty, deeply embarrassed apology, the defeated rival quickly retreated, vanishing into the surrounding sea of wealthy guests. Sloan stood entirely frozen behind Wyatt, staring blankly at his broad shoulders. No one had ever held the shield for her before. Wyatt turned back to face Sloan, the fierce, protective anger slowly fading from his sharp features.
What troubles you?
He looked down at the billionaire with genuine, deep concern,
I'm here for you,
softly
always.
asking if she was entirely unharmed. Without hesitation, he gently placed a warm, heavy hand on the small of her back to steady her trembling posture. Sloane's breath caught instantly as a sudden, undeniable jolt of electricity shot straight down her spine. She looked up into his deep eyes and quietly whispered an assurance that she was perfectly fine.
I've waited so long for
Deep inside, a terrifyingly clear realization struck the cold executive. She was absolutely no longer acting for the cameras. Later that evening, the sleek black town car glided smoothly through the glowing, rain-slicked streets of Manhattan. Inside the dimly lit cabin, Sloan and Wyatt sat together in a heavy, emotionally charged silence. The physical space between them on the leather seat felt impossibly small, the air thick with entirely unspoken emotions. They finally returned to the sprawling, silent penthouse, where the quiet reality of their domestic arrangement waited in the dark. Later that night, the high society glamour faded. Wyatt walked into Harper's luxurious new bedroom to check on his daughter. He gently tucked the sleeping child securely beneath the soft covers of her canopy bed, watching her chest rise in easy, steady breaths. Leaving her quiet room, Wyatt picked up a thick business folder that had been carelessly left on a hallway console by an assistant. He walked quietly down the expansive, deeply shadowed hallway toward the CEO's private home office. He pushed open the heavy mahogany door, revealing an expansive room entirely swallowed by darkness. The home office was illuminated solely by the cold, eerie blue glow radiating from several massive computer monitors on the desk. Wyatt stepped inside, navigating the quiet, hyper-modern space with cautious, silent footsteps. Reaching the massive glass desk, he gently set the stray business folder down near the edge. As he pulled his arm back, his elbow accidentally clipped a tall, precarious stack of thick manila files sitting nearby. The heavy files toppled over immediately, cascading off the glass surface and spilling across the dark floor in a chaotic mess of loose papers. Wyatt knelt onto the dark wooden floor, reaching out to gather the chaotic mess of spilled papers. He picked up the first file, entirely expecting to see standard corporate contracts or acquisition details. Instead, his eyes locked onto a highly confidential hospital intake form bearing a familiar logo. He froze completely. The patient name printed clearly at the top of the document belonged to his late wife. Wyatt's hands began to tremble violently. He frantically shuffled through the rest of the scattered documents. He uncovered a comprehensive, heavily detailed financial background check featuring his own name and photograph. He stared closely at the stark, undeniable timestamps printed in the margins, realizing they were dated 6 full months ago. The glaring dates proved beyond any doubt that their supposedly accidental meeting in the foyer was a carefully engineered lie. Wyatt remained perfectly still in the blue light, his blood running cold as the terrifying realization clicked violently into place. The ruthless billionaire had not stumbled upon a desperate father by chance. She had been systematically tracking his family. A sudden voice abruptly broke the chilling silence from the doorway, demanding to know why he was in the dark. Wyatt spun around rapidly from his kneeling position on the floor, his eyes locking instantly onto the intruder. Sloan stood silently in the office doorway, her silhouette softly illuminated by the warm hallway lights behind her. Having discarded her emerald gown, she wore only a simple silk robe, appearing remarkably soft and completely unguarded. Her previously relaxed expression vanished entirely the exact second her blue eyes dropped to the chaotic mess scattered across the dark floor. All color rapidly drained from the billionaire's face as she immediately recognized the spilled, highly confidential files. In a split second of pure panic, her ruthless, icy corporate mask slammed back into place. Wyatt slowly rose to his full height, a lethal, vibrating anger visibly rolling off his broad frame. He tightly crushed the background check documents within his large fist, taking a slow, menacing step toward the executive. In a dangerous, trembling whisper, he flatly accused her of orchestrating every single accidental disaster in his life just to trap him. Wyatt aggressively listed the impossible coincidences, from the sudden plumbing failure at his job site to the urgent penthouse contract. He furiously questioned if she had actually paid his trusted babysitter to abandon his vulnerable daughter that rainy afternoon. Sloan stepped fully into the dark office, quickly pushing the heavy mahogany door shut behind her to contain the conflict. She firmly instructed him to lower his voice, reminding the angry father that his child was sleeping just down the hall. Wyatt snarled a sharp warning never to speak about his daughter, his chest heaving heavily with profound, betrayed fury. He demanded to know why they were hunted, bitterly asking if he was simply the most pathetic, desperate target she could find. Under the crushing weight of his agonizing accusations, the billionaire's famously unbreakable composure finally shattered completely. Her breath hitched sharply. She pressed her back flat against the heavy wooden door as if physically struck by his words. She whispered a desperate denial, insisting that the elaborate deception was never originally about the conservative corporate board. With a trembling voice, Sloan finally dropped the devastating truth. The entire setup was always about his late wife, Madeline. Sloan explained that 3 years ago, her beloved younger sister had fallen gravely ill, rapidly running out of time. Despite wielding immense wealth and corporate power, the billionaire was entirely helpless to purchase the one miracle her sister desperately needed. Wyatt's burning anger suddenly faltered, replaced by a creeping, icy realization as he matched her devastating timeline to his own. He remembered his wife's passing, and her heroic final decision to offer the ultimate gift of life to a complete stranger. A single tear escaped Sloan's eye as she confirmed his silent realization. Madeline's miraculous gift had saved her sister. She described 8 beautiful, borrowed months where her sister lived and laughed, bound by a profound, fateful connection. However, the tragic reprieve was temporary. Sloan dropped her gaze, her voice cracking as she explained the inevitable physical rejection of the gift. Left entirely alone after the devastating loss, the grief-stricken woman had transformed herself into the ruthless, unfeeling Iron Widow to survive. She admitted to hiring investigators to find the heroic family, intending only to anonymously clear their crushing financial burdens. But watching the exhausted carpenter struggle to protect his deeply vulnerable child, she knew an anonymous check would never truly be enough. Wyatt scoffed bitterly, the intense heat finally leaving his aggressive posture as he processed her logical but highly manipulative justification. He pointed out that she had reduced his family's profound grief and his daughter's safety to a calculated business transaction on a spreadsheet. Sloan looked up with raw, unshielded eyes, whispering heavily that she had never planned for what happened next. She admitted she never planned on caring about the little girl's drawings or feeling protected by him at the gala. A deafening silence grew between them. Wyatt looked at the powerful billionaire standing completely stripped of all her formidable armor. Slowly, Wyatt bent down and methodically began picking up the scattered medical files from the dark floor. He placed the gathered documents neatly back onto the glass desk, restoring order to the physical chaos. His voice thick with unresolved tension, he firmly stated that the original strategic contract still stood exactly as written. He promised to play the devoted partner for the cameras strictly for his daughter's medical needs, but flatly declared that in private, they were done pretending. Reminding her she had simply purchased a husband, Wyatt turned his broad back and walked out, leaving the devastated CEO alone in the dark. The atmosphere inside the corporate boardroom was violently electric the following afternoon. It was the crucial final signing with the Conservative Heritage Trust, the culmination of months of ruthless corporate maneuvering. Sloan sat at the head of the massive obsidian table, projecting absolute power in a stark, tailored white business suit. Her expression was flawlessly composed, an impenetrable mask hiding the devastating emotional ruin from the previous night. To her right sat Wyatt, dressed in his impeccable custom suit, looking completely steady and entirely unbothered by the high stakes. Across the dark table sat Harrison Montgomery, the formidable, gray-haired chairman of the traditional board of directors. Harrison carefully adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, offering a highly approving, satisfied smile toward the fabricated couple. He formally stated that seeing the ruthless executive embrace genuine family life had completely alleviated all of their previous concerns. The chairman declared the board was fully prepared to finalize the monumental acquisition, reaching for his solid gold fountain pen. The billion-dollar victory was merely seconds away, until the heavy boardroom doors violently swung open with a deafening crash. Gregory Sterling, the ambitious rival, strode arrogantly into the room through the violently opened doorway. He looked wildly triumphant, aggressively waving a thick manila envelope in the air for the entire stunned board to see. Shouting for the chairman to halt the signing, Gregory tossed the envelope onto the center of the dark obsidian table. The corporate legal counsel immediately stood up, angrily warning the intruder that security was already on the way. Gregory sneered at the threat, demanding the board read the scandalous employment contract hidden inside the envelope. Harrison frowned deeply, pulling the documents from the envelope. As his eyes scanned the highlighted paragraphs, his face twisted in absolute outrage. The chairman dropped the papers in disgust, loudly accusing the billionaire of fabricating a family just to manipulate the acquisition. The entire boardroom instantly erupted into absolute chaos, with executives shouting and lawyers frantically whispering to one another. Sloan sat entirely paralyzed. The powerful woman was finally cornered, quietly preparing to withdraw the massive offer and retreat into the ice. Before she could surrender, a deep, commanding voice echoed through the room. Wyatt slowly stood up, fiercely ordering everyone to sit down. Wyatt's commanding presence instantly silenced the room. He did not look like a hired prop, but a man utterly in control. Sloan whispered frantically for him not to do this, genuine panic filling her eyes as she accepted defeat. Ignoring her plea, Wyatt locked eyes directly with Chairman Harrison, boldly confirming that the civil agreement on the table was entirely real. Gregory scoffed loudly, attempting to interrupt, but the imposing carpenter completely ignored the rival's existence. Wyatt spoke of his late wife, explaining how her tragic passing provided the ultimate gift of life to the billionaire's younger sister. He revealed that Sloan had tracked him down purely out of profound honor, finding a desperate father and a sick little girl. The contract, he explained, was drafted because the executive mistakenly believed she had to buy something that could not be priced. Wyatt firmly stated that the woman waking up at 3 in the morning to comfort a coughing child was not acting, but showing genuine love. A deeply stunned, profound silence fell completely over the previously chaotic boardroom. Chairman Harrison slowly lowered his gold-rimmed glasses, the furious outrage entirely draining from his weathered face. Before the moved chairman could formally respond, the heavy boardroom doors violently burst open a second time. Sloan's corporate assistant stood in the doorway, pale and trembling as she loudly gasped out an urgent emergency. She reported that the pollen index had spiked, triggering a severe respiratory crisis for little Harper in the building's lobby. The assistant frantically explained that the child's inhaler was failing, and the terrified nanny was currently waiting for paramedics. Wyatt felt his heart drop completely, his strong body temporarily freezing in absolute, paralyzing fear. But before the rugged carpenter could even move a single muscle, Sloan had already violently pushed her heavy chair back. The billionaire completely ignored the $2 billion contract sitting on the table, her eyes solely focused on the open doorway. Kicking off her incredibly expensive stiletto heels, she did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. Abandoning her empire entirely, Sloan sprinted barefoot out of the boardroom in her pristine white power suit. The stunned board members quickly rose from their seats, rapidly following the desperate CEO toward the expansive marble lobby. Paramedics with heavy medical equipment were already rushing rapidly through the revolving glass doors of the expansive lobby. Little Harper was trembling in the arms of her terrified nanny, her pale face tight in a severe respiratory struggle. Sloan threw herself violently onto the hard marble floor in her pristine white suit, completely oblivious to her surroundings. She pulled the gasping child fiercely into her arms, rocking her back and forth while whispering frantic, absolute reassurance. The silent board members, who had quickly followed her downstairs, watched the profoundly touching, entirely unscripted scene unfold. 3 agonizing hours later, the sudden crisis had safely passed. Harper slept peacefully beneath her canopy bed in the penthouse. Wyatt walked out onto the dark terrace, finding Sloan standing barefoot at the glass railing, holding a glass of wine. She softly stated that the chairman had signed the papers, but admitted that without them, her corporate empire meant absolutely nothing. Pulling the thick civil agreement from her pocket, the billionaire slowly and deliberately ripped the paper into tiny pieces. The torn fragments flew away in the night wind. The fabricated contract was gone. Only the genuine truth remained.